Photo Repair Miami Cuban Exile Story, Escagedo Family. Here's an old photo of my grandmother and I want to repair it using Photoshop. I'll also share with you the real-life story of the people that surround this captured photograph way back then in the late 1970s. My grandparents arrived in Miami on the Freedom Flights Wednesday, March 27th, 1968. They had sent my father to Miami back in 1962, and by 68 they were finally together again. In this photo, my grandmother, Ramona Lliraldi Alvarez, is standing in front of her home with me in Little Havana in Miami. She lived there with her husband, my grandfather, Eloy Escagedo Valle, in the last apartment all the way to the back. We lived, my parents and I, on the other extreme side of Dade County, out in Sweetwater, and would visit my grandparents on the weekends. I remember right across the street in front of the apartments was a hospital called Victoria Hospital, and that's still around. Some weekends I would stay over with my grandparents. My grandfather worked the weekends and I'd usually go with my grandmother to the shopping centers over on Flagler. I'd always end up with some toy or a fish in a water-filled bag. We'd also eat something, usually a Cuban medianoche sandwich and a Coke. In the evenings, my parents would pick me up and grandfather would have just gotten back from work, and I remember that. This photo didn't start off with the best of quality, and it did have a lot of scratches and fading to it, but we cleaned it up pretty well. So here's how the place looks currently through Google Earth. I have other pictures taken back then as well as film footage. Here's a picture of my mom, Berta Maria Gutierrez Jimenez, and I sitting on the lawn. If you look towards the background, you can see where my grandmother and I were standing in the previous photo, right by that overhang. Same location in this photo with my grandmother. And here I am with my electric truck, again in the same direction, and you can see the hospital, Victoria Hospital, in the background towering. My grandfather with me on the truck. Same direction in this photograph, from left to right, my grandmother Ramona, my uncle Mateo, my grandfather Eloy, and my aunt Berta Gutierrez Jimenez. In this photo, it's a few years earlier, a decade back in the 60s, and it's pointed slightly towards the left. My four grandparents on the left, from left to right, Eloy, Ramona, grandmother Aguada Jimenez Hernandez, grandfather Luis Gutierrez Jimenez, uncle Gabriel Tapanes, and my aunt Evangelina Cuca Giraldi Alvarez. Here's some film footage from the same direction as the photos. My grandmother loved flowers, and this is her standing in front of her apartment right outside. Here's a picture of my parents and both sets of grandparents right at the back of this property. Here's my grandfather standing inside their apartment by the door. Behind him is the dining room and kitchen. And here he is in the living room standing by the couch. Here's some film footage with everyone in the living room back in the 60s, probably right before my parents got married. Notice the horse ashtray. Here's my grandfather in the kitchen, and my father with his parents. My grandfather carrying me. And here's baby footage of me at the apartment with my family. Here's the bedroom of how it looked in the 80s before my grandparents moved to the house they built on the same lot as us in Sweetwater, where they retired to. I hope you enjoyed coming along with me, telling my story and the story of my loved ones.